What happens when a respected judge forces a pregnant woman to the floor in front of a packed courtroom? He never expected her husband, a U.S. senator, to walk in and turn the tables in the most shocking way possible. What unfolds next leaves everyone speechless. The waiting area of the courthouse buzzed with muted voices and the shuffling of papers. Larissa sat quietly on one of the hard, uncomfortable benches, her arms protectively wrapped around her rounded belly. At 7 months pregnant, she looked undeniably weary, her swollen ankles a silent testament to the long day ahead, but her posture radiated quiet strength. She wasn't here for herself. She was here for family. Her younger sister, Kimberly, was scheduled to appear before the judge today, facing a petty theft charge that reeked of injustice. Kimberly swore up and down she'd been falsely accused, and Larissa believed her. It wasn't just blind family loyalty. Larissa had spent her life standing up for what was right, organizing food drives, helping families pay overdue bills, and hosting community forums to hold local leaders accountable. Her presence wasn't just a gesture, it was a declaration. If someone needed her, she showed up. Period. As she sat there, eyes scanning the room, a janitor hurried past, her arms overloaded with a heavy box of legal files. The inevitable happened. The box slipped, and papers exploded across the floor in a chaotic mess. People nearby either ignored it entirely or acted as though it wasn't their problem. Larissa hesitated for only a second. "You need a hand?" she asked, already standing. Her belly made the movement slow, but she didn't stop. Breathing heavily, she bent down and began gathering the scattered documents. The janitor, clearly embarrassed, tried to wave her off. "Oh, ma'am, please don't. It's fine," Larissa cut in gently, brushing off the concern. "I've got it." Her movements weren't quick, but they were deliberate. The janitor muttered her thanks, her cheeks flushed with gratitude, but Larissa's small act of kindness hadn't gone unnoticed. Someone else was watching. Behind a glass office door, Judge Richard Hoffman peered out, his piercing eyes narrowed in curiosity. Hoffman was a name that carried weight in the courthouse. Known for his no-nonsense demeanor and a record of disproportionately harsh rulings, he was the kind of man who liked to remind everyone who held the gavel. To him, Larissa's actions weren't a sign of character, they were an anomaly. A heavily pregnant woman stooping to help clean up someone else's mess? That didn't fit neatly into his narrow worldview. The courtroom doors creaked open, signaling the start of Kimberly's hearing. Larissa returned to her seat, her face calm but her thoughts racing. She'd rehearsed how she might defend her sister if things went south, though deep down she hoped she wouldn't need to. Hope was fragile, but it was hers. When Kimberly's case was called, the sisters exchanged a look, steady and reassuring. Larissa silently mouthed, "You've got this," as Kimberly walked forward. The judge settled into his seat, his expression as sharp as a blade. Hoffman wasted no time delivering his brand of condescension. "Another member of the same family in my courtroom," he began, his tone dripping with disdain. "It seems trouble runs in your bloodline." The words hit Larissa like a slap. She wanted to speak, but she held back, knowing full well what kind of man she was dealing with. Hoffman's eyes darted to her briefly, as if daring her to challenge him. But then he did the unthinkable. "You," he said, pointing at Larissa, "stand up." Confused murmurs rippled through the room. Larissa hesitated. "Excuse me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her throat. "If you've got the energy to play the Good Samaritan in my courthouse," Hoffman sneered, "you've got the energy for a little exercise. 50 push-ups right here, right now. Let's see just how strong you are." The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of Kimberly's sharp gasp. Every eye was on Larissa. She looked at the judge, disbelief etched across her face. Did he truly think this was acceptable? Did he even care that she was 7 months pregnant? "Sir, with all due respect, I can't," she began. "You will," he cut her off, "or I'll hold you in contempt. Your choice." The humiliation hit her like a wave. People whispered in hushed tones around her, their judgment pressing down like a weight on her chest. Larissa's hands trembled as she slowly lowered herself to the ground. She could feel her baby shift inside her as she knelt, the pressure on her body unbearable. But she wasn't just carrying her child. She was carrying every ounce of injustice she'd ever fought against. She placed her palms on the cold floor and braced herself. The first push-up was agony. Larissa's arms shook as she pressed against the cold floor, her belly making every movement feel impossible. A sharp pain shot through her back, but she forced herself upward, sweat already pooling on her brow. Around her, the courtroom buzzed. Some whispered in shock. Others watched with cruel indifference. Kimberly couldn't stay silent. "This is illegal. She's pregnant. You can't do this," she shouted, her voice cracking. Judge Hoffman slammed his gavel, his face twisted in irritation. "One more word, and you'll face contempt charges," he barked. In the back, young attorney Anthony Davis had seen enough. He pulled out his phone, leaning forward to whisper, "Ma'am, you don't have to do this. I'm recording everything. We can fight this." Larissa paused, her arms trembling. She glanced at Anthony, then shook her head. "It's not about me," she said firmly. "It's about everyone. Let him see how strong we are." She forced herself into a second push-up, then a third, but her vision blurred as dizziness overtook her. Just as her strength began to falter, the courtroom doors flew open with a resounding crash. A tall man in a dark suit strode in, his every step radiating authority. It was Robert Carter, Larissa's husband and a U.S. Senator. He'd dropped everything after seeing a viral video of his wife's humiliation. His eyes burned with fury as they locked onto Judge Hoffman. "What is going on here?" Robert demanded, his voice cutting through the air. "Who gave you the right to treat my wife like this?" Hoffman, visibly rattled, stammered, "In this court, everyone is equal under the law." Robert stepped closer, his tone like ice. "Equal? You call forcing a pregnant woman to the floor equality? This ends now." The room fell silent, the tension thick enough to choke on. Larissa looked up at her husband, relief and exhaustion in her eyes. The fight wasn't over, but the tide was turning. Robert didn't let Judge Hoffman get another word out. With steady determination, he walked to Larissa, gently helping her to her feet. His presence was like a storm rolling in, calm on the surface, but with thunder brewing underneath. "You violated every ethical and legal boundary imaginable," Robert said, his voice cold and deliberate, "and you will be held accountable." The courtroom fell into a tense silence. All eyes shifted to Hoffman, who now looked less like the commanding figure he'd been moments ago and more like a man cornered. His usual air of authority was cracking under the pressure. He adjusted his robe and tried to regain control. "You can't intimidate this court," he snapped, though his voice wavered. "This is my jurisdiction." Robert turned to face the room, his voice rising with conviction. "This isn't about jurisdiction. This is about human dignity. This man has abused his power to humiliate others, and it ends now." With that, Robert pulled out his phone and made a call. The room buzzed with whispers as he spoke quietly, his words clipped and efficient. It didn't take long for the cavalry to arrive. Within minutes, the doors opened, and a group of reporters entered, cameras flashing and recorders rolling. The atmosphere shifted immediately as the judge realized the extent of his predicament. Larissa stood tall beside her husband, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The sight of the journalists lit a spark in the courtroom. Someone in the crowd began to clap, and soon the entire room joined in. The applause grew louder, a collective show of defiance against the injustice they just witnessed. Hoffman's face flushed as he watched the room turn against him. His confident facade was gone, replaced by visible discomfort. He grabbed his gavel, but it was too late. The control he had clung to was slipping through his fingers. In one last desperate move, he tried to leave, but two of Robert's aides intercepted him. One stepped forward, handing over an official document. "We filed a formal complaint with the Judicial Oversight Committee," the aide said firmly. "You'll be hearing from them soon." The judge froze, his eyes darting to Robert, then to the cameras, then back again. He had no choice but to sit back down, the weight of accountability finally pressing on him. As the tension in the room ebbed, Robert led Larissa to a seat, his hand never leaving hers. She watched as Hoffman was escorted out of the courtroom, his steps heavy with defeat. The applause swelled again, a wave of triumph washing over the crowd. Larissa leaned into her husband, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned with quiet determination. This was far from over, but she wasn't alone anymore. Together, they were ready to fight for the justice others deserved. The room slowly emptied, but the energy lingered, a spark ignited by a single moment of courage and a refusal to back down. For Larissa, it wasn't just about her. It was about everyone who'd ever been silenced, overlooked, or humiliated. And now, the world was watching.